Hello. My bad. I had a little bit of technical problem. I had a little bit of an update on the system, and it kind of changed everything. So if we have a little bit of an issue, please let me know. But if y'all are new to the channel, please subscribe and follow, and drop that like button. But anyways, we have a little bit of a show to go over today. We have news on the assault on Kuwait Island. There's a big news about that, as you can see in the thumbnail. And another thing, we actually have confirmation that the ceasefire is about to um, be done with, and I think the United States is literally about to start a bombing missions again. So y'all don't want to miss today's show. It's going to be crazy. So y'all might want to drop in, buckle up, and hold on. Let me get everything over here on real quick.
And that situation's escalating.
All right.
Every region around the world. We've I'm the enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt. And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 15.
All right. Now, so we got that set up now. We actually have confirmation of refilling from sitcom just from the other day. We actually said this the other day as well. We have confirmation of sitcom refilling in the air, which is pretty cool, I think. I mean, you actually refilling a jet in the air. You know what I mean? But anyway, and sitcom released this. This is the I believe the F-15 or F-16. I believe it's F-15. Oh no, it's FA-18. I'm sorry, I apologize. And the refilling tanker is the KC-135. I apologize. It kind of looks like an F-16 though. But anyway, as y'all can see, the marina traffic still the same. Still looking like, you know, there's no really movement going through the strait right here. And you can pretty much see where the United States blockade is. Right down through here. They are not allowing no traffic down through there at all. You can kind of see where they got it right here. And all these ships you see right here, and all these ships you see right here, is waiting to literally pass through the blockade. That's how much of a mess it is right there right now. Have you seen this as well? I'm talking to you. Have you seen this as well? That's all the ships waiting to get through the blockade that's right here. It's crazy, isn't it? But anyways, my bad. I was talking to the Miss One. But anyways, back to the live show, y'all. We're gonna get to the news real quick. We have a lot to go over for real. We do have call lines open. We're gonna jot them open real quick. Come on. Sorry about that, y'all. But anyways, one sec. Oh lordy. Okay, so that's another issue. All right, so call lines are going to be closed for right now until we get this issue figured out. We are going to be going on with the news for now, but we're going to get the call lines sorted out. Like I said, we had a big update on the system, so Let's let's get to the news.
1940 of the War News Stream, and tonight we have very big news out of pretty much every region around the world. We've seen tonight that apparently Kuwait has taken an Iranian assault team hostage tonight after they attacked an island right off of Kuwait's coast that we also covered yesterday, and that situation's escalating. We're also seeing that Iran attacked U.S.-backed positions in Iraq just a few hours ago, and also China's preparing weapons for the Iranian regime yet again through third-party countries, and we have very big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world as significant developments and information has emerged on the failed raid on Bubiyan Island in Kuwait. After the Kuwaiti armed forces were able to repel the attack, news has now emerged that the Kuwaiti army has taken 4 IRGC assault members prisoner, and the Iranian government is now levying significant threats and allegations at the Kuwaitis about their capture. Currently, the Kuwaitis are not classifying these individuals as prisoners of war and are classifying them as Iranian nationals who have been imprisoned for acts of sabotage on Kuwaiti territory, meaning that at the moment Kuwait is not interpreting the situation and require them to follow the Geneva Convention, and instead they will be following the laws of the Kingdom of Kuwait only. We have also been able to additionally hear that at the same time, the Islamic Republic of Iran has conducted significant drone attacks against multiple U.S.-backed bases within northern Iraq, with strikes hitting these facilities over the course of the day, including what appears to be a radar facility. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear other significant developments within the region and further details about the Saudi Arabian strikes, which appear to have possibly not been targeted at just Iran alone, but also Iranian-aligned militias within the Republic of Iraq. We've also seen that at the same time, the United Arab Emirates is fortifying its oil structures and oil sites, and we've also been able to hear of some bleak economic reports out of the Middle East today, as the Republic of Iraq is now stating that they are on the financial precipice, and we've also been able to hear that the Qatari officials are starting to put a significantly grim outlook on the situation with liquefied natural gas, of which Qatar is the second largest producer in the world of. Oil loading has also stopped at Karg Island, while additionally the Israeli Defense Forces are continuing strikes on Hezbollah forces within southern Lebanon. Significant U.S. airlifts are still ongoing at this moment, and over 53 F-16s are now based at the Prince Sultan Air Base south of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, showing a significant uptick in the number of F-16s that are present within CENTCOM's area of responsibility, and also suggesting that the United States is still considering that a continuation or a restart of the war is highly likely. Today, the Senate has refused to vote on any additional restrictions on the office of the president under the War Powers Resolution Act, largely showing that the Senate either supports a continuation of the war or is not going to hamper the abilities of the office of the president to be able to continue the execution of the war against the Islamic Republic of Iran. In the Strait of Hormuz, we've also seen that the Iranians have continued to reiterate that the discussion on who controls the strait, according to them, is not open negotiation, as they continue to insist that the Iranian Republic, or the Islamic Republic, completely controls the waterways without contest. We've also seen that several Chinese ships did pass through over the course of this day, while we've also the president here that oil prices are once again beginning to surge. We've also heard that the Somali pirates, who are a bit of a sideshow at this point in CENTCOM's AOR, are now announcing a $10 million ransom for one of the vessels that they have seized over the past few weeks around the area of the Gulf of Aden. Additionally, the President of the United States is currently within Beijing, China at this moment, engaged in some diplomatic talks with the President of the People's Republic of China, or as they call them in China, the Chairman of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping. At the moment, it is expected that he'll be announcing very soon a significant business cooperation between the Boeing Aviation Company and the People's Republic of China, and we've also been able to hear that at this very moment in time, live on air, apparently they are receiving the President of the United States in Beijing. We've also been able to hear of other significant developments around the rest of the world, particularly within Europe, as we have been able to see the Ukrainian armed forces were able to land significant hits in their drone attacks earlier today, and are currently conducting a drone attack on the Russian Federation at this moment, attempting to target the further north regions around the area of St. Petersburg and the Leningrad Military Oblast. Right now, the Russian Federation is also conducting a drone and missile attack of their own against the armed forces of Ukraine, and we have seen that this has been one of the largest attacks of the war. Poland has also had to scramble their air force today for a Russian Il-20 that came incredibly close to Polish airspace near to the Kaliningrad Oblast, and we've also been able to get reports that apparently the United States of America's 2nd Division of the U.S. Army is now having its deployment canceled or rotation canceled to be a part of the Atlantic Resolve Rotational Division, and we're also also seeing that the additional elements of the 2nd Division that have already been forward deployed to be a part of the Atlantic Resolve Rotational Division are now being recalled back to the United States, which is an incredibly concerning development considering that the Atlantic Resolve Rotational Division is an obligatory requirement of the United States Armed Forces and EUCOM's area of responsibility at this moment in time. We've also been able to hear of other bleak financial forecasts by other institutions, including the International Monetary Fund, over the course of this day, while the Ukrainian Armed Forces have also been holding the Russian Federation back on the front and inflicting significant casualties. Additional news also came out of Washington, D.C. as well, but we'll be making sure to cover all of this in every single bit of detail that we have, starting with our largest stories of the day and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. And I do have to say, folks, that today is one hell of a day in news, and it does appear that at this moment we are starting to see what can only be described as history in the making within the Gulf, or the Persian Gulf at this moment, after Kuwait has been confirmed to have taken a couple of IRGC raiders, or generally assault teams, prisoner. But with that in mind, it is time for us to move on into the largest news of the day, which is going to be immediately taking us back into Kuwait and back to Bubiyan Island. Many of y'all will know that yesterday we were able to report that the Kuwaiti Armed Forces were able to confirm that some time ago they were able to stop an Iranian raid on the island. This was about a week ago, and they were also able to repel these forces, with one Kuwaiti armed service member being wounded in the process. News has emerged today that the Kuwaitis didn't really explain the entire situation up front. The Kuwaitis actually ended up apparently overrunning these IRGC assault teams when they attempted to enter Bubiyan Island by an amphibious raid. And crazily enough, they took 4 of the IRGC assault team members prisoner during this time. We were able to hear confirmation of this today as Syed Abbas Arachi, the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic of Iran, stated the following today. In clear attempt to sow discord, Kuwait has unlawfully attacked an Iranian boat and detained 4 of our citizens in the Persian Gulf. This illegal act took place near islands used by the U.S. to attack Iran, that is Bubiyan Island. We demand immediate release of our nationals and reserve the right to respond. So at the moment...
Also, it's like, what is Iran's explanation for these guys being so close to a Kuwaiti island like that? It's like, if they were that close to be taken prisoner, that clearly indicates they're up to something bad. And also, Kuwait's saying out here that they took these people prisoner, apparently, well, you know, when they went up to the island right there near Bubiyan. So it's kind of interesting. They're kind of like halfway admitting it and kind of halfway not.
Also, on top of that, they made their justification as to why they were trying to make this raid in this statement, because they then added this illegal act took place near an island used by the U.S. to attack Iran, which might be giving us an idea that this was actually an attempted raid against U.S. forces that might still be based on that island, particularly those of the M142 HIMARS units of the United States Marine Corps, which we have confirmed prior have been conducting long-range ATACMS missile strikes on Iranian forces throughout the southern regions of Iran from that area. And we also have footage from prior events months ago to be able to confirm that those forces were within that area during that moment of time. Apparently, the IRGC, or the Iranian government, believed that they were still within that area and may have sent out this raiding team not to try and cause sabotage or damage to the ongoing port development project on the island, but to attempt to try and cause damage and also attack the U.S. forces that may be possibly based on that island even at this moment right now, or may not be there, and they were attempting to try and prepare the area so the United States return into it. Possibly there might be some mines laying around near to the roadside in the desert that the HIMARS might run into and then explode on after the mines detonate. Nevertheless, this is confirming that at the moment the Kuwaitis apparently not only were able to repel the attack, but they apparently conducted what we would describe in World War I terms as a sweep. They were able to completely destroy the assaulting force, and not only that, take prisoners as well. This is something that we generally kind of heard about a little bit yesterday, but haven't been able to confirm, and now the Iranian statement is making it incredibly clear that the Kuwaitis did take 4 of their members as prisoner of war. However, the Kuwaitis, mind you all, are not viewing them as prisoners of war. The Kuwaitis are viewing them as Iranian nationals that were violating the sovereignty of Kuwait and were attempting to conduct acts of sabotage. The fact that Kuwait has not classified classified these forces as prisoners of war means that they are not subject to the protections of the Geneva Convention. And the fact that the Iranian government is also not stating that these were armed forces of the IRGC, of the Islamic Republic of Iran, conducting an armed attack on Kuwait, the Iranians are also ceding their protections of these IRGC members under the Geneva Convention, meaning that at the moment right now, these IRGC forces that have been captured by the Kuwaitis are actually going to be held accountable and most likely punished under the laws of the Kingdom of Kuwait, and not subject to any protections whatsoever by the Geneva Convention. We have also been able to hear once again that there is a growing possibility that they may have been attempting to attack U.S. forces that have been operating on this island. This picture right here actually showing one of the M142 HIMARS of the U.S. Marine Corps firing an ATACMS missile, most likely from the area of Boubion Island or within the surrounding deserts in the northern area of the country. Nevertheless, this is largely confirming at the moment by Abbas Araghchi's indirect statement that this island had been used by the United States to attack Iran, that this raiding force may have been attempting to get incredibly close to the area to try and see if they could raid U.S. forces that might still be there, or to try and lay out traps ahead in advance so that we have U.S. artillery forces or long-range missile forces like these roll back onto the island. They might be able to try and attempt some sort of a surprise attack, or maybe even mine the island to make it impossible or impassable for these vehicles to get off-road and into pre-prepared firing positions. Still, this is showing that tensions are rising rapidly, particularly between the Kingdom of Kuwait and the Islamic Republic of Iran, as this is now becoming a full-blown diplomatic incident between the two countries. And as a result of this, a lot of people right now are wondering what is going to be happening as a result, particularly from the Iranian side, more so than anything. The fact that we are now all acknowledging on every end that the Kuwaitis announced that they took 4 prisoners, and the Iranians are announcing that 4 of their guys were taken prisoner, and all of them are not wanting to say that they are IRGC forces. The Kuwaitis claim that they're just Iranian nationals. The Iranians are claiming that they're just these random passerbys that were going on a pleasure ride near to an island that just happened to be used by the United States for attacks on Iran. A lot of people are wondering what's going to be coming next. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so yesterday, it was bad enough when we covered the story yesterday that apparently the Iranians just simply pulled up to the Kuwaiti island. They tried to run onto it, we'd presume, to go sabotage some.
We have breaking news coming in that China is rushing Iran secret weapons after these massive explosions that rock Iran. The Trump is in China right now. So I said this before on the channel, y'all, that like Trump should not go to China while we are having a conflict with one of their allies. It's just it does not, it don't taste well in my mouth. Let me just say that. Because for one, I mean, how many assassination attempts has Trump had on him since he became president? Oh, well, actually, before he was even president. I'm just trying to look out for our president's safety, and that right there is. I mean, I know how Trump is, so I know he wants to face, things head on, but I don't know, man. That's a little tricky right there. Go Trump. That's all I would say. Go lay down the law. I mean, this is crazy right here. How's it going, Cecilia Miller? Yeah, this is crazy. I mean, we should not have our president going into an ally of our enemy. Period. That should not be going on.
Oil equipment that the Kuwaitis have on the island, but instead of that, they apparently got taken prisoner. That's the new detail we've gotten today, that apparently Kuwait simply took those Iranian forces prisoner. Now they have them, and now Iran's even acknowledging, hey, that's our guys. That you just took our guys in. So they're denying that they were trying to do an assault. The Iranians are acting like they were simply like fishermen or something, lurking around the area. But it's a little bit weird, though, to be lurking that close to in Iran's view, an enemy country. A little bit strange with that. So what are your thoughts? 64% said Iran will resume attacks very soon and use this as a justification. 14% said Kuwait will simply deny they exist whatsoever, the prisoners that is, and 9% said Iran will forcibly retrieve them. And I believe that Iran will probably use this as a reason to start attacking again. They probably will. They'll probably launch some sort of attack on Kuwait until their prisoners are released. That is my guess, because Iran specifically made a point today to go out of their way to make a big deal about this. And usually, I thought they were just going to deny it to a large degree. Like, oh, we didn't send our guys over there. That's not our people. But instead, they took responsibility for it and said they were Iranian nationals and they want them back. So I think they'll use this as a justification.
Everybody, we actually have an update on Miracle's doctor's visit that we actually announced on air the other night. The doctor visit went well, and the surgery is supposed to be going on July the 9th. So that's great news for them. Congratulations on that news. Hopefully she has a fast and wonderful recovery.
I'm with the 64%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that, in my opinion, I do believe that the Iranians are most likely going to use this as a justification of further attacks, particularly against Kuwait, because this is now being blown into an international diplomatic fiasco, if we want to describe it that way, because the Iranians are now demanding the release of these quote-unquote Iranian nationals that have been imprisoned by the Kuwaitis. There is no legal grounds whatsoever under international law, or any law for that matter, that would support the Kuwaitis giving up these people back to the Iranians. Let's go through the facts of what we know at the moment from everything that we've heard, and then let's break it down as to whether or not Kuwait should ever hand these people back to Iran. For one, these guys were on a boat apparently right on the coast of Bubiyan Island, or had made it onto the island. The fact that this boat was either close enough to Bubiyan Island that it was visible from shore, or that they dropped people off on the island, is showing a clear violation of Kuwait's territorial waters, at a minimum, by the Islamic Republic of Iran's nationals, if we were to describe them as nationals, meaning that they have violated the law of the Kingdom of Kuwait, and they've also illegally entered their waters without any form of permission by the Kingdom of Kuwait. Additionally, we also understand that one member of the Kuwaiti armed forces was injured in the firefight that ensued, which also is suggesting that they fired upon the Kuwaiti armed forces, which certainly brings about criminal charges in really any country. I mean, let me ask you this. If you were some guy who happened to, get on a pontoon boat and go down to Cuba, and you shot at the Cuban Coast Guard, would you expect that would be a situation where you get off scot-free? Or would you expect that there was some sort of punishment that would be coming from Cuba's way, or they would attempt to shoot you back? Now, I think everybody who's reasonably minded would assume that if you did that, the Cubans are going to shoot back at you and might even try and take you prisoner or kill you in that sort of a circumstance, meaning that at the moment, they're pretty lucky to be alive. The Kuwaiti army, from what we understand, would generally have had the justification to use lethal force against everyone on that vessel and everyone who possibly made it onto Bubiyan Island, because of the fact that they have fired on the Kuwaiti army in the process of them attempting to apprehend them. So by those two instances alone, we can, one, ascertain that this group was armed, which is clearly a violation of Kuwaiti law, and secondly, they violated the sovereignty of the territorial waters of the Kingdom of Kuwait, which is also a significant violation of Kuwaiti law and also international law as well, meaning that there is no legal grounds to say that there was just a slight misunderstanding on the Kuwaitis' end and have these people released. Not only that, the Iranians or the Kuwaitis have not stated that these people are armed combatants, and both sides are claiming that these are quote-unquote nationals. And this means that they're provided no protections under the Geneva Convention, and that also means that they will be subject to criminal prosecution under Kuwaiti law and whatever punishments may follow. So this situation is entirely out of Iran's hands to be able to demand the release of these people who are clearly IRGC operatives, because there is nothing in any circumstance that would allow for them to be released. And honestly, if the Kuwaitis released them at this point, this would be a pretty bad signal for them to send, because this would be showing that the Iranians could try and conduct as many raids as they want, and as far as the physical damage being caused to the IRGC forces and also their tactical position would be none, because the Kuwaitis would be doing absolutely nothing in response to these attempted and failed raids that they've been trying to conduct so far. So moving us on out of that news, we have also been able to hear of some other interesting developments pertaining to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia within Iraq. Additional news has come out today that according to Reuters, Saudi fighter jets bombed targets linked to Iran-backed Shiite militias in Iraq during the Iran war, while retaliatory strikes were also launched from Kuwait into Iraq, multiple sources familiar with the matter stated. The strikes were part of a broader pattern of military responses around the Gulf that remained largely hidden during the active phase of the conflict that has drawn in the wider Middle East since the joint Israeli-U.S. strikes on the February of 28th, which was the very beginning of this conflict. Those attacks triggered Iranian strikes on Gulf states and Israel that have rattled the global economy and shut the Strait of Hormuz, as we all know, but this is also confirming that Kuwait, which we generally assumed yesterday most likely conducted some sort of retaliatory strikes, to some extent did conduct retaliatory strikes on Iranian forces, but not the Iranian military or the IRGC directly. It appears that they were attempting to target other forces within Iraq, Iranian-aligned militias like the Al-Nusra and others like the Popular Mobilization Front, which have also been heavily targeted and hit apparently by Saudi airstrikes as well. As far as the amount of damage that was caused to pro-Iranian militias in Iraq, it's very hard to ascertain, as we have seen a large number of strikes being conducted on these forces over a year, well, actually multiple years at this point, over the past 3, by the United States, by the Israelis, the Saudis, the Kuwaitis, and everybody else. And so far, we haven't really seen any actual material damage in any large amount affect their ability to be able to field or conduct actions against other forces within Iraq. So we do not know how much damage was actually caused by these strikes, but it does confirm that once again, the Saudi Arabians were very heavily involved in supporting U.S. and Israeli actions in the ongoing war, just not publicly. And we now can confirm that they did conduct airstrikes to some degree on the Islamic Republic of Iran directly and also on Iranian-aligned militias within Iraq. Outside of that, we also have been able to get major news coming out of northern Iraq today that inside of the area, the Islamic Republic of Iran and IRGC forces have targeted U.S.-backed facilities and bases within the area once again, also including this radar installation on the top of a hillside near Halabja, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, within the area of Kurdistan, or the Kurdistan Autonomous Region within northern Iraq. We could actually see the fire billowing from that facility after the Iranian hit just earlier today. Well, here's someone absolutely gassing up a motorcycle as that fire continues to burn on the hillside, but confirming direct strikes on the area within the Kurdish regions of Iraq. We've also been able to hear of eyewitness reports of explosions in Erbil, Iraq, one of the largest and most populous cities within the Kurdistan semi-autonomous region in the area, but we haven't been able to get any video or picture evidence of these strikes and what exactly was used or caused the explosions within the area. Still, this is showing that at the moment, the Islamic Republic of Iran is conducting significant actions against U.S.-backed Kurdish forces within northern Iraq and are continuing to try and cause as much damage as they can to the U.S.-aligned forces, such as the Kurds. Currently, there is an ongoing rumor, which is fairly substantiated at the moment, that the Kurdish forces, which are U.S.-backed, are continuing to smuggle arms across the Iranian border and are attempting to arm the Iranian populace to be able to prepare them for an attempted second uprising against the Islamic regime. We're not entirely sure how successful this operation is, the flow of firearms that are crossing the border every day, and whether or not the Iranian public would be willing to give it a second go after in early January, 40,000 of them were killed at the hands of the IRGC and the besieged after they attempted their first public uprising without any U.S. support. At the moment, that's all unknown, but it does appear that the Iranians are trying to meet this at the head the best they can and try and strike and cause damage to Kurdish forces, which once again are U.S. allied, within the area of northern Iraq as a result. In the meantime, a heavy amount of U.S. forces are being diverted into the area and are continuing to show that the United States must seriously be considering future strikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran as a course of action. Currently, major airlifts are still underway into the area of the Middle East through EUCOM's area of responsibility, with a brief glimpse today showing us, once again, an incredibly large number of C-17s, C-5s, and also lighter transports being located throughout the area and once again moving through the Balkan air corridor into CENTCOM's AOR. At the moment right now, we can actually see that there is a Italian drone that has apparently declared a radio failure at this moment over northern Macedonia, just to point that out. And we can also see that there are continued flights of C-17s and also C-5 Galaxies across the sea, which are continuing their flights from the United States of America into EUCOM to refuel and then on into CENTCOM to be able to drop off the equipment that they've been ferrying from the United States. Still showing us that there is an ongoing growing influx of personnel, equipment, and most likely aircraft as well into the area with these continued flights. One of the most interesting flights that we've noticed over the course of this day was actually a B-2 Spirit, which did have its ADSB transponder on and was broadcasting signals near to the area of the Azores Islands, just west of the nation of Portugal. And this is apparently showing us that at the moment there are some strategic bomber assets that are being relocated into this area, or this was more likely a distraction today, as we have seen that usually whenever B-2 Spirits or larger flights of tankers supporting B-2 Spirits have their ADSB transponders on, usually is some form of a feint to be able to distract the public and also our enemies from where the actual B-2s that will be involved in combat operations are moving. But this is showing us, interestingly, that there is a significant movement of a B-2 Spirit, of which there are only 20 right now in service in the U.S. Air Force, and this may be showing us that there is a possibility within the future that the United States might be preparing to use B-2 bombers once again against the Islamic Republic of Iran, which saw heavy use during Operation Midnight Hammer and during the armed phase of the conflict, which began on the 28th of February. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so it was a very interesting flight because clearly the U.S. wanted that B-2 stealth bomber to be seen. They wanted it to be seen, and they turned on the transponder. But here's the catch, though. I saw a lot of analysts today claiming that this aircraft was heading over to Europe for exercises. The problem with that theory is there's currently, to my knowledge, no exercises ongoing right now. Of course, there are ongoing, smaller size exercises that generally happen from time to time, but a B-2 moving over there to Europe during a very hotly contested war right now in the Middle East, that raised some eyebrows, to say the least. So what do you think is really going on? 77% said the U.S. is preparing to B-2 strike on Iran. 11% said the U.S. is simply doing military exercises, and 9% said it seems like a 50-50 chance. And the reason why I think the B-2 was on the way over there today is it's supposed to be sending a message to the Iranian regime that that thing could be heading over their airspace soon to strike them, because this came in conjunction, by the way, with a U.S. nuclear-armed submarine showing up in the Mediterranean. That just showed up a few days ago. And now we're seeing a B-2 bomber also heading over to Europe, and all this is intended to intimidate Iran. I'm pretty certain that's what this is all about. And of course, we're seeing more F-16 show up today. We'll get to that in just a minute. And we're seeing a massive airlift start again to the Middle East. So I think once this meeting with Xi Jinping is over with, I think the war is about to pop back off, probably worse than ever, would be my guess. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have a feeling that the B-2 bomber is most likely some sort of a threat that's being given to Iran. The flight may have not ever even made it close to Iran. It may have just made it somewhere within the very opening of the Mediterranean and then turned around and started its flight back to the United States. If he's flying it all the way to CENTCOM, if the only intention is to threaten the Iranians, can be done by just having it visibly be seen on flight transponders and then turning it around and flying it back to the United States, which could get the threat across well enough that the B-2 bombers would be used once again against the Islamic Republic of Iran if the war resumes. At the moment right now, we're generally believing that the war is going to be resuming, because this isn't the only significant influx of, I guess you could say, combat aviation platforms that we've seen within the Middle East today. We're about to be getting to news in Prince Sultan Air Force Base and also out of the Senate in Washington, D.C. that'll be giving us a pretty clear picture that there is a consideration of a continuation of war, and there does appear to be some sort of subliminal messaging coming from the Congress that a continuation may be supported by them, considering the circumstances. But it does appear evident at this point that the United States is most likely gearing up to get back to a war with Iran, because we are understanding that diplomatic channels at this point are producing nothing of substance with the Islamic Republic of Iran. We have been attempting negotiations with the Iranians longer than the armed phase of the conflict went on at this point, which was about, at this point right now, for negotiations, a month and a week. We have seen that so far over an entire month and a week, the Iranian negotiating position has not changed a single iota or a millimeter over the course of a month and an entire week. At the very beginning, the Iranians were demanding reparations, a recognition of their complete control of the Strait of Hormuz, the withdrawal of U.S. forces from the region, from the entirety of the region, and also the lifting of Iranian sanctions, and also the release of all Iranian frozen assets internationally. we're now seeing that they're still demanding all of that, and they're also making it clear that they're not going to negotiate on the nuclear issue, and they're also not going to be negotiating on the ICBM issue or the supporting of terrorist forces in the region either, meaning that they're still where they were a month and a week ago, meaning that no amount of hoop jumping and no amount of deal making and art of the deal references is going to be changing that position of the Iranians. They are not ever at this point going to legitimately negotiate in good faith with the United States of America, and that means that at this point, once diplomacy fails, war is the only thing that we can return to, and in this attempt, we would have to hope that the U.S. focuses primarily on a campaign dealing with the Strait of Hormuz and attempting to reopen it to remove Iran's only leverage that they have against the United States and the entirety of the Western sphere. If the Strait of Hormuz is reopened, the situation is well at hand. If the United States once again ignores the Strait of Hormuz and doesn't attempt to open it, then we are screwed for the larger part at that point, because we've now wasted all of our ordinances on other unnecessary targets inside of Iran instead of trying to fix the situation inside the Strait of Hormuz. So moving us on out of that, and the B-2 Spirit for that matter, we have been able to see other significant movements of aircraft within the area as well. As a satellite picture today from Prince Sultan Air Base did show that there is now another 15 F-16s that are now spotted at the Prince Sultan Air Base by satellite photography today. This is now confirming that there are 53 F-16s at Prince Sultan Air Base alone, which is the largest recorded number that we have seen so far, even during the war from starting on the 28th of February. This is showing us that U.S. combat air assets and also multi-role aircraft are still being relocated into the area and being diverted into the AOR, and the only reasoning that we could get behind that is that the United States is still considering a continuation of the war to be highly likely, if not necessary, at this point. The United States is getting screwed largely economically, hand over fist, by the Iranians because of the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, and everybody else in the Western world is as well. And while the damage is slowly accumulating at this point, it's going to hit like a brick wall in a couple of months, according to most financial analysts, and also most industry officials, or heads, if you want to call them that, that are currently speaking on this matter around the entirety of the world, not just including international countries, but also within the United States. We have been able to hear additionally, with this movement of aircraft, the massive airlift, and the flight of the B-2 that was visibly seen today, that today the U.S. Senate has made an important move. The Senate has just voted not to advance an Iran war powers resolution, and this resolution was intended to limit the current president's ability to wage a war on Iran.
It was a close call, though. Like, it was a very close call. There was actually one senator, and it was not the senator that people would expect. It was one senator that prevented this bill right here from actually going the complete opposite direction. I won't mention his name. It'll get political the moment I do that. But it was sort of a close deal with this. So that might be why they're concerned about possibly having to go get an extension of this act, possibly. Yeah, it could be because the support's not as strong as we thought.
It could be, and it certainly does appear that it is fairly contentious at the moment. Quite literally, it's almost an even split, except for the one senator that voted against the war powers resolution today, which might also be showing us that political support at the moment for a continuation of the war is not that high within the Senate or the House of Representatives, for that matter. Nevertheless, though, there is a larger issue that we do have to contend with here. The war generally has to continue at this point, whether we would like to or not. And generally, I would have hoped that when we started this conflict, that our civilian administration officials in the White House would have had the foresight and the knowledge to be able to actually draw up war plans according to the threats that exist in the area and deal with them properly, and they didn't. That's why the Iranians were able to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, is because there was basically no direct military actions taken to try and alleviate or fix that issue before it had coalesced. And now we're here, up the creek without a paddle, and not really able to deal with it or fix it at this point without conducting a great deal of significant additional military action. This means that generally, while there may not be a great deal of political support within the Senate or even the House to be able to see that this war continues, it is necessary at this point that the war continues. We cannot negotiate with the Iranians, which is our only other option at this point, because the Iranians are not willing to negotiate on reopening even the strait, much less doing anything else. And that means that
we're getting another shout out for prayers for Miracle for surgery on the 7th. She's going to be having surgery at UVA. Hopefully she will give us an update on her recovery and when she gets out, and we'll give a shout out to her on the channel.
once again forced, largely our hand is forced to return to war with them to forcibly reopen the strait. So if there isn't an extenuation or an allowance of a continuation of war by the Congress, we may see that the United States either just has to pack up and walk away, which will be about as detrimental as doing nothing, or we'll just keep sitting around like we are right now and do nothing, both of which are pretty bad options at this point, and lead the United States and most likely the world into an economic recession due to the significant oil crisis that's already beginning to form just a couple of months into the ongoing blockade. So I hope that does address that the best I can at the moment, but it is showing us that for now, there is not necessarily a direct statement by the Senate showing that they're going to be corralling in the abilities of the president to continue a war, which might be signaling that a war could continue. But once again, it's a very split vote that happened in the Senate today. Moving us on out of that, we have also been able to hear of other significant developments within the Strait of Hormuz over the past 24 hours. At the moment, we have been able to hear that several Chinese ships actually did get to pass through the strait today, according to NBC, which is citing navigational data, aka marine traffic. We've also been able to hear that at the same time, the Iranians are continuing to reiterate that their sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz is unquestionable and definite, and the matter has already been settled, meaning that they are still considering themselves to be the unchallenged controller of the Strait of Hormuz, and considering that the United States has not directly challenged them really at all, they generally are pretty sound in that sort of a claim. But at the moment, we actually have some news coming out of the People's Republic of China at this moment. And Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so I'm getting a lot of tweets here, and also by the way, Enforcer, I'm not sure if we can show this footage or not because it looks like the White House might have slapped their logo over somebody else's footage, possibly. I can't really tell, so be cautious about that. It looks like it's mainstream media footage that they're slapping their logo over, but we're seeing here that it looks like it is propaganda central inside of this meeting right now inside of China. They have the U.S. president walking past all the Chinese military officials. They have them walking past the military lined up along the entire red carpet. There's a whole horse and pony show going on right now with this whole thing. Certainly an interesting look. It looks like China played the U.S. national anthem as they met, which is kind of interesting. So that's fascinating. Also, apparently, Xi Jinping is now saying that the entire world is watching the meeting and that the U.S. and China have more commonalities, and he's encouraging a stronger relationship between the two. So, of course, that's just political speak. We'll have to see what actually comes out of this right now, but it looks like they're putting on an entire show right now between this meeting right here. So we'll have to see, but I don't really have much hope coming out of this meeting right here.
I would actually have to say, by the way, the Chinese playing the U.S. national anthem is fairly par for the course. Whenever a foreign dignitary or an official or a head of state visits another foreign country, it's always customary to play the home state's national anthem.
Excuse me. Now, I really hope that Trump brings up about this Kuwait thing, because if y'all really want to know, this is the big announcement right here that I was actually going to save for the end of the show, but I want to tell y'all. I'm too excited to tell y'all. So the island that Iran tried to seize or tried to attack, should I say, and they literally got their rear ends handed to them. China actually has an oil field, an oil rig there that belongs to China. So I'm kind of interested in seeing how this plays out with the China and United States meeting like this, having a meeting, and see what all goes about. I don't think none of this is even going to be brought up. If you really want to know, if you really want to be honest with you, I think it's going to be a normal meeting. Hopefully Trump brings up this situation. I'm pretty sure he probably will, and I'm pretty sure he's going to bring up the Iran situation. They've both been looking forward to this meeting, so we'll see what happens, and we'll play it ear by ear. All right.
And then also the foreign state's national anthem of whoever is visiting. So that's fairly normal for the larger part for diplomatic visits. It does appear that in this video we can actually see that they did roll out the People's Liberation Army Honor Guard, which is made up of the multiple branches of the People's Liberation Army. Present in the People's Liberation Army Honor Guard is the People's Liberation Army, the People's Liberation Army Navy in the white uniforms, and then additionally the People's Liberation Army Air Force, which is in the blue uniforms. This is generally their common sort of an honor guard that is brought out for dignitaries or heads of state that are visiting the People's Republic of China. So this seems to be fairly normal, at least in terms of ceremony at this moment. Quite literally everything looks the same as it has for decades at this point, at least on that end. But we do have to point out, importantly, that Xi Jinping's statements, while sounding somewhat mundane and rather diplomatic in their standard form, are actually a little bit important in the kind of message that they're trying to make. With them saying that China and the U.S. have a lot of commonalities, this is a usual textbook action of the People's Republic of China in their attempts to be able to isolate the Republic of China, which is called Taiwan by many people, from the international world. This one being called the United Front. The idea behind a united front action by the People's Republic of China is to try and see that the entire world is in a united front to recognize the People's Republic of China as the sovereign China and the only China, while also delegitimizing the government of the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan. That is a very significant part of the diplomatic playbook that China has been using for decades to be able to try and internationally isolate the Taiwanese diplomatically and strip them a lot of their international recognition, to see that eventually, whenever they try and force a reunification with an armed invasion, it will mean a lot less, I guess you could say, scrutiny globally, and also a knee-jerk response than it would otherwise, because most countries in the world do not even recognize Taiwan as the legitimate China. They only recognize the People's Republic of China and don't even recognize the sovereignty of the Republic of China's government on the island of Taiwan, which the U.S. is one of the few countries that does recognize the sovereignty of the ROC government on the island of Taiwan. So this is actually a somewhat significant statement, at least for the Chinese, and I would hope to God, folks, that the president doesn't fall for that one hook, line, and sinker, because this is literally an age-old tactic. This is one of the oldest trinkets in the booketh. They literally whipped this out on Nixon 50 years ago, and this is why Nixon stripped our recognition of sovereignty for Taiwan and put it on the PRC, but did a little bit of a half trick by then saying that the ROC's government had sovereignty on Taiwan, but they weren't a sovereign nation.
Yeah, we're seeing. It looks like.
All right, so we have some updates on what's going on with the China's meeting. They actually played the national anthem, America's national anthem. This is them welcoming them. This is President Trump in China. He actually closed down the highway and everything else for him. The boss came to town. So they closed down roadways and everything else for him. Yeah. We're going to see how this goes, y'all.
The U.S. is going out of their way to really glaze Xi Jinping quite a bit. So far, Xi Jinping has not made any really kind statements toward the U.S. president, really, from what I've heard. He's generally just made very generic statements like the whole world's watching the meeting. We think we'll have better relations. We want to strengthen the relationship and ties. Meanwhile, it looks like the U.S. president's laying it on heavy. He said, we're going to have a fantastic future together, talking to Xi Jinping. He said, I have such respect for China. The job Xi's done. You're a great leader. I say to everybody, you're a great leader. leader. Laying it on heavy. I love to see here. We're not entirely sure what this meeting's about specifically. We heard that they were going to be making some business deals. That's what he said in a tweet last night. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure geopolitics will probably be a heavy topic during this meeting. But right now, I think they just started talks behind closed doors, I think right now. So we'll have to see what they're going to talk about.
I'd have to say it looks pretty weak for Xi Jinping to be making fairly neutral statements, and then the president going over the top to whip out the Krispy Kreme glaze. It looks like the power dynamics more in China's court than it is ours, because instead of responding with the lukewarm neutrality with lukewarm neutral statements of our own, the Chinese are remaining neutral while it looks like we're trying to vie for their affection at this point on the diplomatic phase, which is an absolutely ridiculous sort of a notion, considering that the People's Republic of China is quite literally the leader of the opposing sphere of the United States at this moment globally, and has also supported in arms the Russian Federation and the Islamic Republic of Iran against U.S. and Western interests over the past prior years. Not only that, they're continuing to threaten our East Asian alliance.
Yeah, also, by the way, another thing that's very notable, I want to go ahead and preface it with this. Remember when Vladimir Putin came to Alaska, he came to the United States, the U.S. president was there to meet him when he got off the plane, like he was there for that. When the U.S. president just went to China, he just arrived a short while ago, Xi Jinping was not there at Air Force One to meet the president getting off the plane, which is somewhat abnormal, to say the least. Usually when a foreign leader of that stature shows up, especially from the United States, you'd expect that the leader would meet them off the plane the moment they land. But in this case, it was not done that way. Xi Jinping waited until he drove all the way down to the little parade meeting spot, and then he met him after that. So that's saying something. In diplomacy, that type of stuff is actually like making a statement when they do stuff like that. It seems petty to everybody else, but it's really showing. It's more like a power dynamic type thing.
Yeah, it's snubbing. It's a sign of disrespect because there is a planned itinerary, and it is expected that the head of state of the People's Republic of China would be present at the time that the president disembarks the aircraft, and they were not, which is showing that they don't wait on the U.S., the U.S. waits on them. That's what that's supposed to show, and it's supposed to be emphasizing that there is a difference in the power dynamic, and China has the ongoing power dynamic while the U.S. doesn't. And then it's not really added to in any positive way that the People's Republic of China is making very neutral statements, and then the president's going out of his way to glaze the chairman of the PRC, which doesn't really do us any good because it also makes it once again look like the power dynamic is totally in China's court, not ours, and largely they can make whatever statements they want and we'll just go along with whatever they say, which is not what the U.S. position should be. The United States is the leader of the U.S. sphere. Either they can respect us equally or we'll walk. That's what the general premise of this meeting should be. Not that the Chinese are trying to pull little power plays on us and, yank us during a handshake or something like that. That's something that we don't generally support, especially with the PRC, considering that they are the very antithesis of what the United States of America is having to go up against these days. But moving us on out of that, it does appear that outside of these diplomatic developments in the People's Republic of China, we have also been able to get some other news out of the Middle East. We've also been able to hear that over the course of this day, the United Arab Emirates has denied Israeli claims that Netanyahu did visit the UAE during the active part of the Iran war, which we didn't really hear about ourselves, and the UAE is denying that that ever happened. So we're not really sure if that did happen, or if Israel just made up that story off the top of their head. Meanwhile, the UAE is also continuing to fortify their oil sites, as we are seeing that they are now rapidly erecting net structures over the oil tanks throughout most of the country, kind of like the Russians do, to be able to try and protect them from future drone attacks. This has proved to be fairly unsuccessful in Russia, and we've only seen this sort of a system work a handful of times. We're not really sure if this is going to be working in the UAE, and to be entirely honest with y'all, I don't really think this is going to work, but it is an attempt and a stopgap measure to be able to try and stymie further Iranian damage from being caused in the UAE, but it will unfortunately be unsuccessful for the larger part. We have also been able to hear out of the Strait of Hormuz that the United States of America is once again seeing surging oil prices, because after it became fairly clear that there isn't really any progress in the peace talks, it does appear that the oil prices have now risen 17% over the course of 24 hours. We have now seen that the price per barrel of oil has now risen to $103.48 for West Texas something crude oil. I always forget what the I stands for.
West Texas Intermediate.
West Texas Intermediate, as compared to West Texas Closer Far, which I guess are the other options. But outside of that, it does appear that the price of oil is once again beginning to rise. We were able to hear, however, folks, luckily, just coincidentally, right after this happened, the vice president then came out and said that we're really close to a deal with Iran, which is great to hear because they've been saying that for like a month and a week. And I hope that at some point that eventually turns out being true. But anyways, moving us on from that, we've also been able to hear that apparently, according to the Energy Secretary of the United States, Chris Wright, he said that Iran is frighteningly close to producing a nuclear weapon.
Hey yo, did you see that newspaper that Abe was holding? Go back for a second to that post right there. Hey, wait a minute. Hey yo.
Man,
bro, I think there's something missing here, man. This might be HARP.
Man, you know, I feel like this is revisionist history right here.
Man, I tell you what, somebody's grandmother somewhere said, "Oh, it's a time travel." It's like somebody fell for it somewhere, I'm sure. But man, I tell you what, Abe out here with that future talk. Look at that.
Honestly, man, he's out here with that future speak. Man, next thing you know, Abraham Lincoln's going to be on TikTok or some other, social media platform. But moving us on out of that whole deal, we've also been able to hear that CENTCOM gave an overview of their ongoing blockade. We're actually not going to cover that one on air because it's really not that big of a deal. They just listed the number of ships that they've turned around and also fired on. I think they fired on 11 and they've turned around 63. That's something around the running number right now, which is really all that's important out of that situation. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear from multiple financial heads of industry and also the economies within some nations that things are not going particularly well. According to some Iraqi officials, including the senior Bloomberg economist Ziad Daoud, he said that Iraq's future is bleak and they have about 5 months of financial buffers before entering the mother of all crises, which is generally expected at this point because major oil producers that have monolithic economies surrounding the petroleum industry, like Iraq, are looking at an apocalyptic economic scenario. Much like the Russian Federation has been dealing with Ukraine striking a lot of their oil infrastructure, the Iraqis are quite literally seeing that they can't ship a drop out at this moment because they have no way to get their oil to the Red Sea, and they also have no way to ship it out through the Persian Gulf because of the blockade. Because of that, they're literally seeing no exports whatsoever, and these oil companies are dying inside of Iraq and most Gulf states at the moment because of this sort of pressure that's being put on them. But before we get to the rest of the economic news that has been coming out of reports from the Middle East today, we do want to talk about the Chinese. And this is actually going to be moving us on over here for a moment on into China, because while this is generally East Asian news, it has a lot of overlap today with the news going on in the Middle East. Get ready for Comedy Central, folks, because the statements as they came out in sequence today are absolutely pitiful. So, moving us on into our first bit of news out of China, we did get it confirmed that Air Force One did land at the Beijing Capital International Airport earlier in the day. We could already see some PLA officials getting ready to marshal the aircraft into its special portion of the tarmac, which it will be kept at until the president leaves the People's Republic of China. Afterwards, we were able to hear that a U.S. senior White House official stated that China has already pressured Iran to reach an agreement. I'm not going to lie, that doesn't sound that good, because they're saying that China already pressured them. That makes it sound like China already gave up, and it also makes it sound like Iran didn't listen to a damn thing that China had to tell them. So that's not really...
Do we really believe China told them anything? It's like, well, why would China tell Iran to give up the war? It's like it's hurting the United States. I mean, regardless of what Xi Jinping is saying at this meeting right now in Beijing, they don't want the United States to succeed. They want to supplant the United States as the world's global superpower. So, I mean, it seems to me pretty blatant that they probably didn't even try.
I don't think they tried at all. And I mean, the next bit of news that came out right afterwards is showing us that they didn't try. Because now we're starting to hear the reports come out that there is a plan that China has that they're finalizing right now for an arms deal with Iran, according to some other U.S. officials. So after the White House official said that the Chinese have already pressured Iran to end the war because they love peace, we have now been able to hear that apparently the Chinese are preparing an arms deal for the Iranians to arm them to fight the United States further in the war. So that doesn't really sound like it's lining up all too much. It seems to me, folks, I just hate to say this, but it seems to me like the White House is living in a completely different world than the rest of everyone else is at this point. But a lot of people these days have been hearing some interesting developments about this one, and a lot of people have been talking about this in the chat. So Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so we did see today that apparently U.S. intel is now revealing in the midst of this Beijing meeting that apparently China is planning third-party weapon sales to Iran, and they're doing it through countries to make it seem like China is not truly supporting Iran, but they're doing it through really sneaky methods. So that just came out today, by the way, after China allegedly said they pressured Iran to end the war. So what are your thoughts? And also, by the way, apologies for the typo. It meant to say help, not hope. That confused the hell out of people. Autocorrect really screwed me on that one. But 48% said China will not help in the Iran war, while 27% said the U.S. will sell out Taiwan for the Iran war to end, and 15% said China will help end the war regardless. So I'll have to be honest, folks. I am a little bit worried that the U.S. is going to try to sell out Taiwan, but I would have to see it to believe it, because to sell out Taiwan means selling out our semiconductor industry, which is TSMC, which is located and headquartered right there on Taiwan. That is highly critical for the United States to have access to those chips. So selling them out means basically handing that away to China. I'm not sure if the U.S. would do that, because if we did that, we would be in virtual ruin at that point, to say the least. We'd be in a very foul situation in manufacturing, pretty much every way possible, and China would basically have a chokehold over the United States at that point. So I think that China will probably not help Iran in the war, and obviously they're probably going to help send more weapons, I'd imagine too, because it sounds like they're already planning on doing that, and it sounds like they're already going through with it, which we've been hearing about the entire time. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that China is not going to help in the war whatsoever. As a matter of fact, they're most likely going to try and see about making the United States sell out Taiwan to end the war, and then they're not even going to follow through with their end at all, and just, play static with the U.S. for as long as they can until the U.S. finally figures out that we've been conned, probably. Because we do have to understand, folks, that this situation, if the U.S. does see that Taiwan is sold out to try and end the Iran war, to try and find a way for China to put pressure on Iran to end the war, this is going to end up devastating for the United States in the long run. Right now, the Iranians have us in a chokehold because of their blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And I have to remind everyone of the old saying by Admiral Mahan here in the United States that whoever controls the oceans controls trade, and whoever controls trade controls the world. And that statement is true to this day. 90% of all goods are transported by ship. 90% of all trade in the world is done by ship at some point. And that means that controlling the world's waterways is an incredibly important thing. And trying to sell out Taiwan is going to screw us over in the long term, just for us to be able to see that we're not screwed over navally in the short term because of the Strait of Hormuz. We can deal with the Hormuz militarily. We can. There's no such thing as that being impossible. It is doable with the right kind of tactics, with the right kind of strategy, and proper war planning done by people who are career military officers, not some guy who just thinks he knows everything. It would be very easy to clear out the Strait of Hormuz in those circumstances. So we do not need China's help whatsoever in resolving the situation. It can be resolved entirely on its own without giving China anything. On the other hand, if we sell the Taiwanese out, here is what's going to happen. The Chinese are going to get control of the island. They're also going to get control of TSMC, which is the largest semiconductor producer on the planet. China is already trying to screw us over as much as they can with precious metals or in rare earths refining right now at this moment. Now imagine that with semiconductors. They are going to control semiconductors like it is a quasi-military operation. They are not going to allow anybody who's Western aligned or American aligned to get any semiconductors from TSMC, meaning that the entire computer industry, which holds up the modern post-industrial economy here in the West, will come to a grinding halt over the next several years afterwards, and China will be in the position that we're in right now technologically. Not only that, strategically, this is completely blasting a hole in the first island defense chain within this area. Right now, Indo-Pacific strategy relies on us defending these islands between South Korea and the Philippines, also including Taiwan, which isn't a direct ally officially of the United States of America, but we are more than willing to help defend them and have been for decades if the Chinese try and invade the island. If Taiwan controlled this island, if China controlled this island, correction there, I just had a Bushism. But if China controlled the island of Taiwan, they will now have access to the east coast of the island. the east coast of the island is completely outside of the island defense chain. Then once again, to remind everybody here, let me go draw this on the map to show you all where this island defense chain is and why it's so important. This island defense chain is made up of a group of islands that consist of Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and the Philippines, which gives us a really shallow area to be able to detect, find, and destroy Chinese submarines before they break out into the entirety of the Western Pacific. That also includes the Scarborough Shoal and also the Spratly Islands, which are down here in this area of the Philippines. So let me put this out here as the island defense chain to show this to you all really quickly. So let me put a red line on it right here and try and get this to where it's easily viewable for everyone. So that is the island defense chain. This is our main line of defense against Chinese nuclear attack submarines. If we do not have this defense chain intact in the way it is right now, we would see that Chinese nuclear submarines would be able to sail out into the Pacific, most likely on 6-month deployments, possibly even 8-month deployments if they have any sustainment capabilities, and they would be able to rain hell and havoc on all global commercial shipping within this area and also within the Indian Ocean, which is the most heavily trafficked ocean in the world for international shipping, day and night. It would be like the U.S. trying to find a needle in a haystack at that point to try and find one of these Chinese nuclear submarines and destroy it. And we would have to be able to do that over the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, trying to put all of our resources towards that effort. That, at that point, is going to become as devastating in the short term and long term as the blockade on the Hormuz is right now in the long term picture. The loss of major commercial ships these days is the loss of billions of dollars per ship and also a humongous amount of TEU capacity on each ship because we build them to be as large and therefore economically viable as possible. And so this would be an absolutely catastrophic outcome, not only for our economic interests, but also for our strategic interests as well, to see that the Chinese took that island. We cannot sacrifice our long-term strategic longevity as the United States of America just for the short-term gain of trying to end the blockade that we so ignorantly ignored until it had been laid, and then we wanted to act like it was a problem when anybody with brains knew that that was a problem the whole time. So I would say that we certainly should not be selling out the Taiwanese to China to try and get a quick end to the war in Iran. That is an absolutely ridiculous notion, and that would also lead to the ruin of the United States of America in the decades to follow if we did such a thing. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least at the moment. And it is time for us to move on out of that bit of news in China and on to a couple of other pieces of news that we've also gotten out of China today. Apparently, at the moment, according to CNBC, there is a report that allegedly the president is going to extend the U.S.-China tariff truce and announce a major Boeing order from China during his visit with Xi. That's allegedly reported by CNBC at the moment, which has already shown that there is going to possibly be some major economic deals that are going to come out of this visit, which we automatically assumed because many CEOs of major companies representing the companies as their top company officers went with the president of the United States to China to most likely start making business deals with the Chinese. So this is largely expected at this point. We've also been able to hear of the current itinerary over the course of this day, which is currently being followed through with at the moment right now. And right now they're in the Great Hall of the People having the current press conference, which many of you all have seen the clips of here on stream just a little while ago. And then they'll be continuing on with the itinerary for the rest of the day afterwards. Hopefully we don't hear of anything massively destructive coming out of this situation. Because at this point, I couldn't tell you all if there isn't or is going to be something destructive coming out. I mean, you know, I hope that we can all have faith in Tim Apple. Because if anybody's going to save us, it's going to be Tim Apple. So, moving us on.
Honestly.
So moving us on out of that, it is time for us to get on into the rest of the news that we have outside of the Middle East. Well, actually, we still have a little bit to cover in the Middle East, one more or two more things in Somalia and Israel. But once we get to those things, we are going to be moving on into the rest of our news from around the world, which generally is in Europe over the course of this day. But before we get to that, I do have to thank all of y'all so much for watching so far tonight. We have seen that there has been a peak viewership tonight of 16.4 thousand people, and also 75,000 people have watched this stream the first hour. I've got to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many people have been here watching the stream over the course of the night, and I hope that y'all have been enjoying the quality of our coverage so far. We try our best every single night to make sure the news is well researched, analyzed, and also covered, and I hope that we've been able to meet that criteria once again tonight. So before we move on to the rest of the news, thank you all for your time so far. We're going to be making sure to get 3 questions out of the chat before we move on into the rest of the news. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our first super chat of the night goes to none other than Garrett Ballhead. And thank you very much, Garrett, for that $20 support. And we do appreciate it very much. And Garrett said 14,000 people here for the news, from people that make no money outside of super chats. I said, this is real news on what's happening around the world. And God bless you all, and God bless America.
And I got to thank you massively for the support, Garrett. And I got to say, it's been a pretty significant viewership tonight. Recently, we've been in the top 20s in America for a live stream. And I got to say, it's a crazy thing to think that we're covering news daily at this point. We're one of the largest voices in news, at least live on air, that's on YouTube. And I got to say, a humongous thanks to folks like you who support this channel and help us to make it possible. Because if it wasn't for viewer support like yours, people that went out of their way to support the channel, we just wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. For years now, we have had no ads and no sponsors on these streams, and we've run entirely off of viewer support for 1,541 days, which is a pretty long running streak. And I got to say that it's an unbelievable and amazing thing to know that folks like you go out of your way when you don't have to support this channel, so that way millions of people a month can be able to get their news here from this channel pretty much absolutely free. They don't even have to spend a second of their time watching an ad or a sponsorship to be able to listen to this news. And I got to thank you so much once again for those incredibly kind words, because once again, if it wasn't for folks like you, none of this would be possible. And long live the Republic, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $20 support from none other than something Starmer. And thank you for that $20 support, good sir. We do appreciate it very much. I don't see a comment left with it, though. It looks like it was just straight up support right there. And we do appreciate that straight up support. And that super sticker of the YouTube creature grabbing onto that trophy and being very happy about having that trophy. But also, by the way, I heard that a particular guy out there named Starmer said he was a gooner. Apparently, that's a football fan. Not American, though.
Hey, yo.
What say you?
Hey, yo! Wait a minute. What? He said that?
Yeah, he said he was a gooner, but apparently that's like a football fan or something in England, I guess. Although people seem to be laughing at him in England, too. So I'm not sure if gooner means what he thought it meant.
Isn't that the guy? Isn't this also the guy who stated that when he goes to sleep he doesn't dream and he also can't visualize things in his mind or something? Isn't this that same guy?
And possibly, I don't remember that part, but possibly.
Huh, that's interesting. You know, not to delve too much into this, but I have been hearing folks, and you know, the British folks might let us know if this is true. But I've been hearing that his own party is trying to oust him at the moment because they're starting to realize that if a snap election is called, if he's still around, they might start to lose that pretty badly. Which I mean, at this point, that's just British politics. I mean, you know, if you look at it over the course of the past few years, they've gone through like 10 prime ministers in like 3 years. So you know, it's a fairly rough time in British politics. It's kind of like the 1950s and 60s again, with how long a prime minister lasts. But I have been hearing about that lately at the moment, and I've been hearing folks recently that have you heard about that man? That his own cabinet's trying to oust him.
Yeah, I really don't keep up with that too much, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean that's something else right there, you know, because if y'all ever follow parliamentary politics in Britain, like not as far as like the Labour Party and the Tories and all, but if you just follow it as far as how it structurally works, having the cabinet, your own cabinet try and oust you is actually exceptionally rare. Usually people resign before stuff like that happens in Britain, but oddly enough, this guy's sticking it through no matter what. So you know they might end up legitimately ousting him even in his own party, which will be nuts. I mean that's basically unheard of in modern parliamentary history for that matter. But anyways. A big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're moving on into the rest of the news for the night. So Matthew, what do we got?
And this one goes to EMJ6446, and then they put in a $50 support, which is the biggest support of the night, by the way. We do appreciate that. Wait, hold on, I'm about to sneeze. I about lost it with that. Somehow I came back from the brink right there. I almost lost it. But thank you very much, EMJ, for that support right there. I held back to sneeze in honor of your super chat. And he put in that 50, of course. It said, thank you for all the hard work you do.
And thank you so much, EMJ, for enjoying the hard work we do and massively supporting it to help it to keep on running. Huh?
I was just laughing. Go ahead.
But I gotta say, it's an amazing thing that you're supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. Folks like you make this thing a reality and help us to be able to grease the gears that run this channel, which is basically just our bills to keep the lights on and stuff. So that way we can focus on this thing every day to do it as a full-time job. And folks like you help to make that a reality, and we're massively appreciative of you because you're helping us to be able to keep the channel running and helping this channel to keep running so that way millions of people can listen to the news every month from here, the Enforcer channel. So humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does rest that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us folks to move on and into the rest of the news for the night, as we have been able to hear of some other significant news from around the rest of the world over the course of this day, particularly from Europe. And building us on in the European news, we have been able to hear that, oh, by the way, whoopsie daisy, I forgot everybody, we have a couple of topics in the Middle East left to cover. We have been able to hear that inside of Qatar, the Qataris have put a little bit of an outlook today on the situation with liquefied natural gas from Energy Intelligence. An exclusive from Qatar's Energy Minister, Saad Al-Kabi, who said it could take a minimum of 2 to 3 months for LNG exports and broader energy shipments to normalize even after the Strait of Hormuz fully reopens. Apparently, from what we're understanding, it's, of course, largely because of the blockade. We've also been able to hear that on top of that, they're expecting that the prices will remain high for the next 2 to 3 years at this current situation that we find right now. This is a fairly significant issue at the moment, as many of y'all will know, because we do understand that because of the blockade, this is starting to cause significant physical shortages of most liquefied natural gas and petroleum products, and not only that, it's causing significant physical shortages of other vital industrial components as well, such as fertilizers and agriculture and other facets as well, also including oils for plastics and whatnot, which will be creating significant price hikes and also increasing the shipping rates per good per ton around the entirety of the world in most even national transportation markets. This is a pretty significant issue, and this also means that regardless of what we do at this point, the price of goods and transportation will most likely remain high for a significant period of time in the post-war period, most likely several years at this point, according to the Qatari Energy Minister. Not only that, the International Monetary Fund today has also put out a very concerning statement as well on the economic situation, as they've stated that there is a high risk of a global recession if oil prices remain high until 2027, which at this point, it's almost a certainty that they will most likely remain high regardless of the outcome, because even military action at this point would most likely see that the Strait of Hormuz is partially reopened to shipping traffic by the end of 2027. Which would mean that the oil price would still remain high, and if not, would have even gone higher from the point that we're seeing right now. This is, of course, pretty significant issue once again, and we are seeing that basically every financial expert group in the world, either heads of industry, involved in the production and shipment of these goods, or the actual monetary organizations that observe these sorts of economic trends and issue loans like the IMF would to entire nations based off the economic outlook, are starting to say that things are looking rather grim. So I would have to say it's quite obvious at this point that they are looking quite grim, and the situation only gets worse with each passing day that the United States does not take resolute action to be able to reopen the Strait of Hormuz at a bare minimum. And right now, a lot of people are talking about the additional news that's come out today from Corrig Island, as we've also been able to hear that apparently the Iranians have stopped loading ships at Corrig Island. Here are some satellite photos showing the 8th of May and the 11th of May, which are now showing a complete cessation suspension of any type of activity at the Karg Island loading piers for oil tankers going to the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is fairly mysterious because for a long time now, during the entirety of the war and even during the ceasefire, the Iranians have been loading up ships continuously at Karg Island on a literal daily basis. And now over the past few days, from largely the 9th, we're now seeing that satellite photography is proving that they're not loading a single tanker any longer at Karg Island. And a lot of people are starting to wonder what is up with that and why in the world the Iranians stopped loading oil there, considering that that's where 90% of all of Iran's oil exports are loaded and shipped out of. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so the satellite data shows that as recent as like 3 or 4 days ago, it looks like Karg Island's oil export terminals have been completely empty like ghost towns, and nobody's really sure why. Of course, there is an oil slick right there near one of the export terminals, but that generally would not stop a ship from coming up to the terminal, though. So what's a likely reason that this is the case? 54% said the Iranians have no way to transport the oil. That's why they've stopped. 33% said they expect U.S. attacks soon, and they want to make sure their ships are not in harm's way, and 9% said it's due to the oil slick. And like I said, I only use the oil slick. That's not keeping the ships away. They would probably take their ship straight through that anyway, not really care very much. So it's probably not that. I would say it's probably because they have no way to transport it. They've probably filled up all their ships, and I did hear they're running out of storage for the crude oil, and they probably simply run out because, of course, they can't get their vessels past the U.S. blockade on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, and that's probably why they simply stopped loading right there. Also, there could be an aspect to it that they might expect U.S. attacks soon, but even during the last U.S. attacks, they were still loading up oil even during the attacks last time. So, I think I'm with the 56%. It's probably due to a lack of transport. But what say you?
I would say that it's probably due to a lack of transport. It's also probably due to a lack of available ships that have the capacity to even be loaded any longer, because they haven't been able to get a single ship out of the Strait of Hormuz for a good while at this point, and so they've been pre-loading these ships to be able to get them ready to go through once all the blockades end, or if there's ever a lucky situation, just start slipping them on through, which hasn't really appeared yet. So they might run out of ships that they can even fill, and on top of that, if there are still ships to fill, where do they go? They just stay in the Strait of Hormuz like everyone else. And we've seen a couple of them that have tried to run the U.S. blockade, and they just end up getting blitzed by the U.S. Navy and the Marines, and then they get boarded and seized. So that doesn't really end up well for the Iranians in any circumstance. So there really isn't any way to get it out of there, and there might not be any ships left to even be able to load that have the spare capacity to be loaded with oil. So generally, that would be the situation that we're understanding at the moment. Also, a lot of people are currently talking about the oil field situation in Iran, but then having to cap some of the wells. And that's actually something that's been happening throughout the region already, especially in allied nations, like our Gulf State allies. A lot of them have already had to cap a lot of their oil wells within their surface-based oil fields. And we also understand that some of the rigs have also stopped production as well. And as many of you all know, once an oil well stops constant production, that well head actually ends up imploding, and it becomes unusable. You have to rebore the hole that is being used to extract the oil to be able to continue extraction at some point in the future, because the only reason that the, I guess you could say the corridor or the hole down to the actual oil deposit is actually remaining intact is that it's under pressure from the oil that's rocketing up to the surface. Once that pressure ceases to exist, those drill heads actually implode on themselves, and that means that they're no longer usable. That's already happened in a lot of Gulf State nations, meaning that their oil production will have significantly decreased even once the blockade ends, and they'll have to rebuild that capacity. And now we're starting to see that similar is happening in Iran, because we have been hearing news that they are starting to cap oil wells because there's just nowhere to store the oil if they continue production of it. And also it appears there might not be anywhere to load it onto, like on a ship, if they were trying to stymie that impending situation of having to close off these wellheads. So right now it's generally a region-wide issue. In the meantime, folks, we're not having that issue here in the United States, because we're shipping out so much oil, we're literally having to pump it straight out of the strategic oil reserves in Louisiana to just try and get everybody their oil. So looks like we won't be having that problem over here, much to our detriment in the future, but it also appears that the Middle East are having the opposite of that problem. But moving us on out of that, we have also been able to hear that the Israelis have bombed, according to the IDF, 40 targets in southern Lebanon that were claimed to be Hezbollah forces. And, folks, just for our comedic relief of the day, it's that time of the day, folks, the Somali pirates have finally weighed in. Yeah, man, they come in here strong today, and they're demanding a handsome ransom. That rhymes. They actually demanded that a oil tanker owned by an Emirati company must pay a ransom of $10 million for them to release the tanker that they stole in the Gulf of Aden.
Jeez, man, what is that in Somali money? Is that that's like 10 billion in Somali money?
I think that's 10 trillion. I don't think Somalia has a currency, man. This is just literally worth the whole country of Somalia, basically, in Somalia.
That's awful right there, really. That's crazy. I guess in the scheme of the cost of the ship, I guess $10 million isn't too bad, I guess, in the scheme of the ship, I would think. I mean, still, though, that's quite crazy. It's wild that the Somalis are back to this piracy yet again. I guess they're the captain again.
Man, I guess they are the captain, but I gotta say, folks, you would have never seen it coming, would y'all? The return of the Somali pirates. Out of everything that was on my bingo card, folks, for this whole year, the return of Somali pirates was actually not one of them. Because the Somali, if y'all know the history of piracy always has this sort of a deal of regionally having a renaissance at some phase and then dying off rapidly afterwards once it becomes too big of an issue. That's how Caribbean piracy went way back in the early 1700s. After the war that Britain had, a lot of the privateers became pirates because they're still trying to finance the vessels that they had bought to be able to privateer. They ended up having a golden age of piracy. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was Port Royal where the large earthquake happened. There was a large earthquake that created a tsunami. It washed away Port Royal, killed most of the pirates, and then also the Royal Navy came down here and just started slaughtering pirates left and right and killing anyone that they could find. So then that also ended the whole age of piracy down here, and that came to an end by the 1730s. And then piracy was never really an issue down here in any large form. the Somali pirates had their very same sort of renaissance and put down as well. In the mid-2000s, they came into a resurgence or something of a renaissance for the larger part and started to conduct piracy on the high seas around Somalia. Then after that, we started to see around 2008 and 2009 that significant international anti-piracy actions were made to be able to put them down. And they did. They largely wiped them out for the most part, and most of the pirates went back to just, doing whatever they did on land because they didn't want to go out to sea and die at the hands of the Chinese, the US, the French, the Russian, the North Korean, and also the British navies, which were just generally sitting off their coast 24/7 waiting for them to pop up and then they blow them away. And so then the age of piracy came to an end about 2012 and 2013. Now it's coming back, and I guess they just sensed a moment of opportunity because everybody's busy dealing with the Houthis and also the IRGC up the Strait of Hormuz, and they just realized that it's basically open season down there in the Gulf of Aden and right off the coast of Somalia, and they're back to raiding and seizing ships left and right, and now they're demanding ransoms just like they did back in the days of the age of piracy in the mid 2000s and the early 2010s. So pretty crazy, honestly. I never thought we'd see the return of it, but here we are. Moving us on out of that whole deal, unfortunately, that company will have to figure out how to pay that ransom because at the moment I don't think anyone's going down to trying to get the ship for them for free. But moving us on out of the Middle East, it is now time for us to move on into Europe, as we do have a significant amount of news that's been coming out of Europe over the course of the day. Quite a lot of it, actually. The war in Ukraine has been somewhat active today. Before we get into the actual minutiae of the details that have happened surrounding all of this today, we do have some interesting statements that came out of Moscow. Folks, Jeb and the crew, they've struck it rich, and now the Beverly Hillbillies exist, but in Moscow. They call them the Taliban Hillbillies. And it appears that the Taliban has arrived in Moscow today to participate in the Russia Islamic World Forum. This is being
Man, not the Taliban. What the hell? Russia's getting really desperate now. They're bringing in the Taliban like there's some formal top-end delegation. Geez.
Man, they've actually been doing this over the past few years, ever since the Taliban took control. Slowly yet surely. Remember in 2023 when they first brought the first Taliban delegation whatsoever to open relations between them and the Russians?
Yeah, I remember that. This time they got a whole banner for it. They got the whole red carpet rolled out for the Taliban. That's crazy. I mean, what did the Taliban even have to offer Russia?
Man, I heard that the opium really be hitting hard this time. I don't know what else they got. Because they all they have bobby fields.
Yeah, they don't really have anything to offer. It's they're just desperate for any allies.
Yeah, I mean, Russia is scraping the bottom of the barrel these days. I mean, at this point, man, they probably go to the North Sentinel Island and try and ally with the North Sentinelese at this point, which are literally living in a Stone Age era sort of a culture technologically. But I mean, it's something. Also, by the way, folks, I have to say that for a lot of people who always look at the Russians as kind of holding up the exemplar of what the Western world is supposed to be, it's kind of a little bit interesting that they're having an expo under this name, considering that kind of goes against the whole propaganda initiative. They've been spoon feeding clowns in the West for years at this point, because generally you would expect that they wouldn't have an expo like this, but yet they are. Still, this is being led, by the way, you wouldn't believe this, folks, by the Taliban's Minister of Trade. What the hell are they trading? What does he do? What's his actual job?
I don't even know. It's what they're doing. They're trading guarantees of peace in exchange for food. It's what could this possibly even be?
Okay, hold up. We've got an answer. We've got an answer. How many exports in billions of dollars, Matthew, do you think that Pakistan makes annually across the board?
You said Pakistan?
Afghanistan, sorry.
Oh, probably less than $1 billion.
2 billion actually. So they're getting up there. They're getting I guess somewhere. I don't really know. But beyond that, their main exports, folks, are, get this, fruits, nuts, cotton, medicinal plants, and carpets. Those are their top export categories. So they're really coming in with the heavy hitters, folks. If you want a carpet, it might be Afghan. You want a dog? Maybe an Afghan. Nuts? There's plenty of nuts. They got the Taliban. It's just basically a bobs and bits sort of an industry. I mean, they really don't have anything significant to export because Afghanistan doesn't have any industry, basically. It's all agrarian for the most part. So everything that they produce is agrarian. So in the modern day, that means basically nothing. But here they are. Here's the clip of them walking through. That's the Minister of Trade right there to get into the meeting. Oh, yeah, I was just playing the 4 seconds. We can also see this guy marshalling him through a wide open area, as well. All of it really comes together. Also, by the way, someone just said medicinal plants. Yeah, I kind of always remember that being called opium, and also poppy seeds. I don't remember it ever being called a medicinal plant. That's like saying, well, cocaine isn't a drug. It's a medicinal item. It's what is this, the 1880s? That's a drug. It's a class 1 drug at that. But anyways, moving us on out of that whole deal, we've also been able to hear that Russia announced today, folks, because they're such a big friend of the United States, Putin stated, and this was, by the way, in direct response to the Iron Dome defense system, that Russia will continue to develop missile systems capable of overcoming all current and future missile defense systems. Wow, that sounds like they really respect the United States of America. Folks, that's something else. Because I've been hearing for quite a while now from this current presidency that the Russians really respect us and they really want to be friends with the United States. And Putin just made it clear today that they're going to continue to create missiles and weapon systems that are advanced enough that they'll be able to get through the Iron Dome and try and kill millions of Americans in the process. That sounds like a friendly country to me. Because, every country that's allied to us and loves us in the world says that every day. Don't you remember when the French said that, man? I swear that I heard them say that 2 weeks ago about us.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
All the time. I mean, come on, folks. Clearly they're friendly. They want Americans to see their missiles up close at Mach 6 hitting their city. That's definitely a friendly action. And that's why we should continue to increase our cooperation and friendship with the Russian Federation and continue to give them deference and generally the upper hand in every single diplomatic exchange because they are friends like no other. Truly amazing. I'm being sarcastic, by the way. That's clearly showing that they're an enemy of the United States, but apparently some people are blind to that in Washington. Anyways, moving us on to that, we also got to hear that the Polish Air Force had to be scrambled today due to a Russian IL-20 getting incredibly close to Polish airspace while it was flying near to the Kaliningrad Oblast of the Russian Federation. So that was reported by the Polish Ministry of Defense today, but we didn't get any further updates or reports on that, meaning that the situation was dealt with. However, we have been able to hear that there has been a fairly concerning development with U.S. force deployments within the area of UCON's area of responsibility. Today, we've been able to hear that the United States has reportedly canceled the deployment of the Army 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 1st Cavalry Division to Europe, where more than 4,000 troops have been sent to reinforce NATO's Eastern Front. A portion of the unit already in Poland has reportedly been directed to return home. This is a very interesting development here because from what we understand, the 1st Cavalry Division was most likely moving into the area to be able to replace the current division that is operating as the Atlantic Resolve Rotational Division within Poland. To give you a little bit of a background on how the U.S. Army Europe and Africa is structured and functions within UCOM's area of responsibility, there are two main fighting divisions that we have in UCOM's Army of Europe and Africa at any given moment in time. And these are called the Atlantic Resolve Rotational Divisions, which fall under the command of 5th Corps in Poznan, and 5th Corps then falls under the command of U.S. Army Europe and Africa inside of, if I'm not mistaken, it's Wiesbaden, which is where the headquarters is at currently. This 5th Corps is incredibly important for rapid response or quick reaction forces of the United States to be able to try and stop an initial Russian invasion or a Russian offensive if it ever begins. And this has been a critical part of modern NATO doctrine and modern U.S. doctrine within this area of responsibility in Europe. The fact that this division is being ordered to be recalled for the large part, at least the elements that have already made it over there, and an entire brigade combat team of the 1st Division is also being stopped from being deployed as well, is showing us that the Atlantic Resolve Rotational Division that is based out of Bolesławiec in southwestern Poland is apparently not even going to be present inside of Poland within the immediate future. And this is wildly concerning, greatly concerning. These Atlantic Resolve Rotational Divisions, mind you, are the very, they're not the screening force, they're the actual blocking force that we have inside of Europe. Our screening force is in the 2nd Cav Regiment, which is inside of Germany, which is a rapid response force that can operate as a screen and slow down an enemy advance but not stop it. The Atlantic Resolve Rotational Divisions are designed and deployed to be able to stop an advance, dead in its tracks if need be, and to hold them until further reinforcements can arrive. So the fact that this entire division is not being deployed right now at this moment is wildly concerning and showing a great weakening of U.S. Army Europe and Africa within the theater at the moment. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this right now, and what do you think about it as well?
Okay, so I would say personally that this one single brigade being recalled to the United States probably isn't that bad of a concern. Of course, it's concerning on its face, but the bigger concern is this is a much larger concerted movement by the United States to not just bring home this brigade, but also a whole bunch of other units as well. They're generally trying to strip U.S. forces out of Europe, which is coming at a very odd time to do that. But we're hearing that apparently from the 2nd Brigade here of the U.S. Army, all the soldiers will be returning home, and any of the ones that were already there partially, they'll simply be brought right back home to the United States immediately. So what are your thoughts? 57% said that's bad. This will clearly encourage Putin to move on probably Europe. 20% said good, it's time to bring them back. And 16% said it probably won't make much of a difference. And I'm definitely with the 56%. We're already seeing the signs. Putin has launched drones into Latvia. He's launched drones into Moldova today. Now, granted, Moldova is not a NATO country, but they are closely NATO aligned. And we've also seen drones going into Romania as well, which is another NATO country. So we're already seeing Putin get aggressive with NATO, more so than he was previously. And now we're seeing even more forces being pulled out of Europe. So I would say personally that I'm rather concerned by this. This is probably a bad move. There's really no good reason for it either. I don't even know why we're recalling these forces like this. It makes no sense, really. But Enforcer, what say you?
This is not a good move at all at this point. This is one that I find greatly concerning, because this is weakening what is supposed to be the strongest Atlantic Resolve Rotational Division we have by design that is in Poland. And I saw someone in the chat really quickly say that the 5th Corps is actually based out of Fort Knox, Kentucky. They are also forward operated as the headquarters for 5th Corps, which commands the Atlantic Resolve Rotational Divisions inside of Europe as well. And if you go and look at that really quickly, you'll go and see that that is the case, because they do fall under the command structure of U.S. Army Europe.
But yeah, y'all see where, I mean, we're starting to pull troops out of NATO now. Which, I mean, you can't blame us. I mean, the Iran situation was a test for them, and they literally absolutely disgraced the United States. They highly disrespected us by not letting us use our bases at first, and then not even give it a hand. They don't even say, well, I mean, we can, but it's going to be a little bit before we get there. They didn't say that at all. They just flat out said, hell no, we ain't going to help you. But I mean, that's all right. I mean, we'll remember. Just say that. We'll remember. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But that's it for the night. That's the news for tonight. I hope y'all enjoyed it. We was on air for almost 2 hours, so we had a lot to go over. But anyways, that's the show for tonight. Like I said, make sure y'all drop a follow or subscription, and make sure y'all smash that like button. And then hit that bell button so y'all get notified whenever we come on air. We had some things we had to do the past couple days, and we went on air yesterday. But we will be on air tomorrow evening